Okay, folks, so to kind of take away some complexity here, I'm just going to kind of make a new project and see if I can quickly start from scratch and get us up and running as first characters before it gets too complex. We add in the animations and everything. So make a core 2D here. I'm using Unity version 6. All right, so we have our new scene here. So a couple things mentioned in the other videos. In older versions, it was hard to use dark theme. You'd get an error down here because they misspelled search. I think it's all fixed in Unity 6. So I'm not seeing the error there, so I think we're all right. Let me just see what happens if I hit play. I think we'll be okay. I think that's something unrelated. Yeah. So this one already starts with that default system here. And it is named system actions. Let's rename that as player input. Just because that name's a little easier to write when we have to put in a script. I'll go ahead and click this and generate the class for it. Name, global namespace. Now, if this didn't make a script for you, a default script, you could go up here because remember we went to package manager at some point. We put in input system and we installed that to make sure it was up to 1.1.2. And so at that point, you could right click and do create input actions. And then you could, when that pops up, there's a button over here for create that you can use to get the default input actions back. But this core 2D should start with it, with the default actions already in it for controller sticks and stuff. Okay, so we're going to right click up here and we're going to create a 2D object. Or we could do an empty. Let's see. Just going to do a sprite shape, sprite square, and name it player. For this player, we need to have a couple things in inspector here. Let's go ahead. So we got our sprite render for square. We can change that layer to be the other renders we need. We need rigid body. So here in physics 2D, new box collider 2D, and a rigid body. So you can see this fits the box exactly. It's not too big or too small. Okay, and then we need, I'm just gonna hit this to kind of close that. And then we need physics 2D. We need a rigid body 2D here. Dynamic. I'll leave those on for now. Constraints freeze rotation on Z because when it hits a platform, you don't want your character to spin wildly out of control. Okay, so we've got that. Now I'm just going to make a script called player movement. So I'll right click, create. C# script I think should work. Actually, let me check this first. Yeah, so that's attached to this. What we need is a script just for the character itself. So yeah, we'll go to scripting. Try an empty C# script here, and we're going to name it player movement. Let me make sure I type that correctly. Might do a reload here. Okay. Double click that. In the preferences, we should have moved everything over VS Code. Now, you should remember these from my past lectures. So using Unity Engine, let's also do using system dot collections and lines with semicolon using system dot collections generic semicolon. So system dot collections dot generic semicolon, capitalize like that. And then using Unity Engine input system. And the reason for this is because, let me save this real quick. Down here, we're using this player input. So we have to bring in that library to use that system there to make it work. Okay, so we have this class player movement. Remember that everything, this entire script, everything's going to happen between here and here. All the rest of stuff we put in, variables, functions, whatever. It has to be fully encapsulated in this. This brings in libraries, but everything else happens inside here. So, wow, this is trying to anticipate what I need. Let's go ahead and start with the public. What we're going to do is we're going to access that rigid body. And so what that means is that we are taking the pre-existing class of Blueprint rigid body and making our own version called RB, an instance of that class. And if you remember my lecture about the dogs, you can have a class of dog. Like all dogs will have a name, all dogs will have an amount of legs, and all dogs will have a method called bark that they may be able to use. So that's a class. It's not an actual dog. We can make an instance of that class named Toby. And then we send it some parameters like a name, which is Toby, because all dogs in the class have a name. And it will use that class, that action and bark, like all the other dogs in the blueprint can. And we could say legs equals 3 to say we know it'll have legs. That's an option in the dog class. A specific dog has 3 legs. So we're just taking it public. Remember that means it's accessible in other functions. Rigid body is the component that's already built in here that we accessed. We clicked on player here. So this rigid body here, we're accessing the component, and then we're making our specific version of it called RB for this player. So RB is the name we'll be referencing. And then let's say public. And I'm hitting tab key to autocomplete. If it's got a suggestion I like in there, float. And I'm going to say move speed. Okay, so this is just a variable. Float is decimal numbers, and we're naming it move speed. Right now it's equal to 5 float, which is like the number 5.0. So that's a variable we can change later if we want to change speed dynamically. And we're going to say float. Horizontal movement. Okay, now I'll make vertical movement for now too. We might not use it till later. All right, now everything in these scripts will have a void start. I think we're supposed to use capital. Okay, so the void start, what it's going to do is when this game starts, and you also see awake or upon wake up, So basically when anything starts here, it's going to immediately do this. It's going to say our RB that we named here is equal to get component rigid body 2D. And so it is going to access this player's RB thing. So it knows that RB is specifically equal to the rigid body for this player. Getting component, look at its rigid body stuff, right? Okay, and then we might not need this yet, so I'm going to go ahead and Control/ to turn that into something that's not read by the computer. If you see a slash that turns green, that means it's something that's meant for us humans to read. The computer won't look at it, so I'm temporarily taking it out of the running. All right, so public void move public, it's a public function that can be accessed from other areas in the script. A void means it doesn't have to return a value. Like in number calculator, you'll send it two numbers, and then here in the function, we'll add them together and we'll return a value. This is carrying out a constant action, doesn't have to return a value to whatever called it. And then we're naming it move, and we're passing what we call parameter here. So move is taking in the input action callback context. So this here is going to be sort of like the context of the action that was called. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. It's a bit trickier to explain. So resolve movement equals context.read value vector2.x. That's move speed. For now, I'm going to do Control/ on that one too. Just going to recompile everything. All right, so let me take a look. Now we need to assign that script we just made, player movement. Let's go ahead and see if we can drag this over and assign it this character. Now, remember I kind of guesstimated about making a new C# script. So I think what I need to do here is, because most scripts here have a colon and then mono behavior. Let's try that. So I made just a C# script like the general programming language, not one specific to Unity. So I had to add in that little section. I think that's what happens now. Okay, boom. Now, we talk about this rigid body here that we're bringing into it. But on the surface, it doesn't necessarily know which one we're referring to here. So what we have to do, we actually have to take the player, because we're in the player right now, we have to take its rigid body and drag it into this part of our script to tell it this is the rigid body we're talking about. And we can change our move speed here. Now, also, I'm going to go ahead and just add a simple box here. So I'll do right-click 2D object, just make a square. Nameless platform. Okay. Now I don't want to accidentally move my character here, and I think I made it in the same area. Platform, okay. Now platform, we need to add box collider on it too. So when this touches this, it knows that it can't fall through it. So let's go down here. Let me just double check I'm not moving my player back since they're both squares are the same size. Okay, we're good. All right, let's hop down here. And we are going to go to physics 2D, and we are going to make box collider. Now they have a platform collider in here too, I think. Let me just double check on that. Make sure we're using the right one. Hinge, platform effector. You know what? Let's just do a box collider for now. Let's see, I'm dialing down that. You can do a composite if you had a whole bunch of little colliders here on like a platform that had like a jagged bottom like stone. So like from Metroid, you could composite them all together. In this case, we're hitting none. Let's try that out real quick. I'm gonna Control S to save. Okay, we don't have action yet. I think we are well on our way. Notice it did stop here on the player. Okay, so now we are figuring out our horizontal movement here. So what we need to do is have a void after start, usually have a void update. So I'm going to go right after these brackets because remember start is executing the code between these brackets when it starts. Let's do a void update. Sometimes you'll see fixed update. Fixed update just make sure that all time is the same across different processors and stuff, so that's not based on your hardware configuration or settings, so everyone has the same time. All right, so what we're doing, remember RB is our player version of the idea of a rigid body. So we've taken this idea of rigid body and made it specifically called RB for our player. That's the instance of it. We're taking its velocity. So when you see a dot something, it means it's taking a parent component and is accessing one of its little subclasses or abilities. So our rigid body, specifically for the player RB, we're accessing its velocity. And then we're setting that equal to a new vector2, and that's horizontal movements multiplied by move speed, and a comma, RB dot velocity. The new system I think uses linear velocity, so we'll try this out. Dot y. Now it's vector2.x. I'm actually going to take the move speed out here since we're handling it up here. So horizontal movement equals context area value vector2.x, getting x component of the horizontal move speed, and then we're addressing that up here. Okay, Control S to save. Let's jump back and see how we're doing so far. For any errors. And yes. Okay. Okay. So we're doing pretty good getting set up here. We've got our script and everything done. So what we need to do next, our player, I'm going to kind of shut some of these down, our scripts, etc., box collider, rigid body. You know, I think we need to bring our player input in here as well. Okay, whoops, I made a mistake. Actually, what we need to do, set the movements. Let's go ahead and drag player as a whole into this. Now we should be able to go to function, player movements. Okay, so I was having some issues. A few things might be. I went to input settings, and I'm going to click on enable input consumption. Because what's happening, I was able to drop my player into here. So basically, we had to choose from here our player input. And then this is the default scheme. We want any, because we're not starting with the default, like when we keyboard and mouse. Player maps player, not UI, because it's got two options in there. The player mapping of buttons or the UI for like when you're in menus. And then change this to invoke Unity events to get this down here. And I dragged my player over here. And we should be able to see in function move corresponding to our public move function here. So a couple of things. I noticed I had not capitalized the UN update. That was an issue. Now this is public, so the inspector should be able to access it. And this is public, meaning it should be able to access it too. Because I said public gives you access to outside things. So because this is public, we should be able to get move in here. So this is the player movement, and then the function called move, and it's public. So what that means is here in events player movement, should be able to drag and drop player and get move there. So that is not working. I'm just trying to figure out why. Oh, there it is. Player movement move. Okay. So I'm just going to save it. I'll just make sure you did those two things I did. You go in here to edit, and then to your project settings, and then input package settings, enable input consumption. And then in here, make sure if you're following me exactly that these capitalizations and stuff are correct. And save this. Save this. You might need to reopen this if you made some major changes. Sometimes you have to reopen Unity here. One other option we have is that sometimes if it's just acting up and you think something's working that shouldn't, you have to go in here to assets. Sometimes you have to refresh or re-import them all. So especially if external stuff isn't happening, this is basically going to rebuild your whole project. I don't think I need to do that yet. Maybe a restart though. Let's see what happens here. Oh, okay. I'm getting movement now. Partial movement. I don't remember what I set to be a jump. Oh yeah, we haven't scripted the jump yet. So WASD keys and my arrow keys are working. So we've kind of jumped to our first hurdle here. That is working. So it came through a combination of things. We had, and most of you already done this, I'm just mentioning in case you haven't. We went in and we got that new input system. So most of you are on 1.11. Now at school, I'm on 1.7. I can't use this one here, but on home, which I'm at now, my home computer, I'm on 1.11. So yeah, I am on the same system as you. So we made sure that system was updated and that it had that ingest checkbox I just showed you on. And then we made a new player object. We made sure that player object had a few things, like he had a player movement script, and we dragged the rigid body into it. We gave him a sprite for the square, a box collider, a rigid body, and here, remember, we turned off Z. And then we have this player input we made with the default controls. We did choose this player input from the menu. And we did change this to invoke Unity behaviors, and then our event now. So, oh, there it is, under player. Okay. So I'm just gonna check one more time to make sure. Oh yeah, if you have that active, it's hard to change stuff too. So that's part of the problem. I should have paused this test mode. Okay. So we're good. So next we're gonna start working on some jumps and some other things. Okay, so we're good to go so far. We got some basic movement. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. I'm going to double click this. Let's see our movements. We got jump, space keyboard, but south. So that's set up in there. Let's go to our script. And we're just going to go ahead and make one of these for jumping. So the thing up here, they often say you should make what they call a header here. So it's like a little section. Square bracket, header, capital letter, then parentheses what you want it to be called. So under that, we'll have the move speed, horizontal movement. And then we're going to make a header for jumping. Oops, I meant to make that first one movement. Okay. Your movement. Then it needs to be parentheses. Oops. Okay. Sometimes it will do like an autocorrect and put both sets there. Make sure you don't forget the other one. So all right. Let's see. Header jumping. I don't see why it's got this one highlighted in red. Oh, it's because there's nothing underneath it yet, I think. So we're going to do a public float jump force. Let's make this 10. Okay, now that went away because it just needed something underneath it. So we got a section for our movement and a section for our headers. Okay, now we've got a move function down here. So let's go ahead and do a public would jump. And it's basically suggesting the right thing for me here. Our input action, because we're looking for the context up here in move of the move part. And this context, once again, remember that is let me find that section. Okay, that, if I double click it, this is the context move. So now we're doing context jump to apply to that part. So our jump input context is going to grab that. And we're saying if it is performed, like if the button is currently assigned to its hit, then RB, well, there's two ways to go about this too. We can do RB velocity equals new vector B, RB velocity X has jump power. His suggestion is that add force vector 2 up times the jump force, or 2D impulse. For now, I'm going to go ahead and control slash that. And we'll see if that's a better method later. Now, RB, of course, is our instance of the rigid body. And we're going to say dot. Now, in the old system was velocity. And in the new one, I think they're switching over to linear velocity. Okay, so let's try that. We got jump force here, supplying that, so we can change that jump force at will. So our RB.linear velocity equals new vector 2, RB linear velocity of X. So on the X-axis, how fast is it moving? And then comma, and then jump force. So this would be like a full height jump. And then if we want to add something for like if they kind of take their finger off the trigger of the button real quick before it's done, say if it's canceled, we're going to take that velocity and the RB linear velocity Y, we're going to multiply it by half. So your jump suddenly gets kind of cut short, cut to half power. All right, so that is saved. It's going to regenerate everything because it detected the change in the script. So I go back to player, inspector, let's check our events. Player, jump. Okay, I'm going to try dragging this here again. Now we've got jump in here. Boom. Okay. So let's save that. Now you can see where those headers came into play too. They held there. So let's save that and see what happens here. Oh, okay. Our jump is now working. Now, if I hit it real quick and stop, you see how the jump's not quite as big. See, I'm getting a pretty big jump there if I hold it down, though. So we're going to have to add some physics layer to control that. Oh, and I am double jumping, right? So if I jump and jump again, so we're going to have to add something into it that basically says if we are grounded or touching ground, then we can jump. Otherwise, if we are not grounded. Now, it used to be a little bit more complex. You used to have to do like a Boolean value to test if you're jumping, and then do like a list of all the platforms you could be touching to know if you're grounded, etc. But they've simplified it a little bit with this new input system. So we'll cover that in the next section. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is kind of start a system where we can tell what's ground and what's touched. So let's go back to our script here. Then we're going to do another header here after jumping. We're going to call this header here ground check. Okay, so we'll do header, capital, of course, ground check. Public transform ground check. Let's do ground check position. Check public. We're going to do a capital vector 2. Okay, so this is going to, once again, vectors like x, positive, negative, and y up and down like a 2D graph. So it's going to do ground check size. It's equal to a new vector of 1/2 and 1/2. Talk a little bit more about that later. And then this part, public, layer mask ground layer. So what this is doing here, there's a masking and tagging system. So when we're making all these platforms, we're going to want them tagged as a ground layer. So we don't have to manually go through and add a bunch of stuff to have it recognized as that. So we're setting this up, like when we get back there, we can use the layers to put everything on a ground layer. And that's going to help a little bit. All right, so next thing we have to do, we have to draw a little cursor on the ground checker so we can see it. So we're going to do this under public void jump. Now remember, public void jump, for instance, is everything from here to here. So when I say after we need to go outside, it's closing brace and then enter. So we'll do private void. So what this does here, this makes a little function called onDrawGizmos. And I'll put selected so it's selected. Then it's going to make a gizmo, that color, whose color is green. And then it's going to draw a wire cube, ground check position, and ground check size. So it's the size of ground check size and position. Okay, let's go back. Okay, so in our player movement script, so that's where we added it. Ground check position. So let's go ahead and make an empty. Oops. Actually, I don't want the POS, just that. Put it kind of underneath the player if we can. Like that, so it's sort of inside or parented to the player. Let's drag this ground check over And we're going to make a ground layer for everything that is ground. Okay, so we've got ground check under here, sort of like parent-child relationship. And then ground check, we dragged this down into here. Transform. I'll put in a spray now so we can kind of check. See if I have anything ready to go already. Shop funds. Yeah, I've forgotten this new project. I don't have the shop things in yet. So I will go ahead and I think if I look in my downloads, should have the shop fund there still. Drag that here and drop it into the assets. This is because of the version control thing, I think. That's causing problems. Hopefully it won't actually do anything in our game. Okay, we'll come back here. So on this, if I accidentally double click that, I'll click this. And oh yeah, I need to cut it up first. So I'll click this here, multiple, open sprite editor, change this to, I could do it by size here, but I'm going to slice it by cell count. And I know because of, like this screen where I downloaded, it's from Piskel, which I showed all of you to look at the columns and rows, center, or actually on this. Yeah, I think I want the pivot at the center. You could put it at the feet, I guess, but yeah. All right, we don't need to keep empties. Now we come up here and we hit apply. So now we got these. So for now, I'm going to player. Let's see if I can just grab him and put him there. Yeah. So I might want to adjust sizes on things. 2D box collider. Edit collider. It's still square, so let's make it fit him. Okay. Rigid body. I think that should follow the sprite, hopefully. So. Now our box here is going to need a little bit of adjustment there because of that. So I go to player here. What I'm looking for is in our scripts. If we click this, we need to tell it to move it to really be able to see it. And then let's go ahead and try and resize that a little bit.